In this lesson, we are going to focus on categorical variables. We're going to talk about how do we summarize them and how do we display them. So first, what exactly is categorical data? Again, we've talked about this. We've talked about it's a variable that names categories. So we're not dealing with numerical values. We're dealing with which category something belongs in. Typically, when we're dealing with categorical data, we will use counts to count how many items or how many subjects fit into that specific category. And then we'll do percentages based on that whole, so either counts or percentages. Typically, we're going to be calling these frequencies. So frequencies are how often something occurs. So when we are summarizing categorical data, we are doing it either numerically or graphically. So when we're doing this numerically, we will often write a frequency table. And a frequency table will just list all of the categories, again, going back to eye color, brown, blue, green, etc. And then typically there is a little place for a tally. So if you're actually tallying by hand, you would keep the tally in there as you're going through your data. And then of course you would find the overall frequency, which would be the total of the tallies. So that's a frequency table. Our other options are a relative frequency table, either using decimals or percentages. So we wouldn't just look at the frequency of, say, 15 people with brown eyes and 8 people with blue eyes and 3 people with green eyes. We would actually then say, well, brown was 15 out of the total, which is 15 plus 8 plus 3. So 15 out of 26, and we would divide that and turn that into a percentage or a decimal. So again, these two are very related. So whether or not I'm writing, say, 33% as a percent, or if I write 33% as a decimal, it would be 0.33. You get the idea. Graphically, we would use either a bar chart or a pie chart. A bar chart is great because, of course, you can compare, how high are the bars compared to each other. A pie chart is great if you're looking at parts of a whole. So if I'm looking at, say, my budget, and this is how much I spend on my home, etc., and this is my car, etc., it's easy to just look at that picture and get a sense for where you're spending all of your money. So pie chart is great if you're looking at parts of a whole. So again, if I'm going to summarize with a frequency table, we're going to start with our raw data. So for instance, this is grades in our statistics class. So looking at this, you can see that I have a column for grades, A, B, C, D, and F, and then I have a column for count. So if I were actually doing this by hand, I might have a little one in between here where I was going to do the tallies. And so I could say, well, there's a B, there's an A, there's a D, B, etc. And then at the end, count them up. Of course, the other way to go is to start with A and say there's 1, 2, 3 of them, and then write 3. So it's really up to you. This column is never necessary. It just helps you, especially if you have a very, very long set of raw data. This is the same data that we had on our last slide, but now you can see that we're dealing with the relative frequency. So there were 3 out of 15 total, so that's 0.2, which turns into 20%. There were 7 Bs out of 15 total grades, which is 0.4667. We would turn that into 46.7%, again, just by moving that decimal 2 places. And of course, here they've rounded to the nearest tenth. Typically, in whatever question you're given, they might tell you what to round to. Great rule of thumb is it's always better to, keep a larger amount of your digits in the question rather than rounding them off, which makes your results not quite as realistic. A bar chart is another, so this is a graphical way to go if you're going to show graphically. It displays the frequency or the relative frequency. So what I want you to notice here on this screen is that these two bar charts look exactly the same, except this one is dealing with frequency, and this one I don't have, sorry about that, I don't have the label over here, but this is the relative frequency. So notice these are the percentages that we just looked at on our last screen, and these are just the actual counts, but as you can see, these are the same. They look the same whether it's, a frequency or a relative frequency. The other thing I want you to notice here about a bar chart specifically is that there are spaces in between each of our bars, because later we're going to talk about histograms and there's no spaces for histograms. So here it's important that there are spaces between each of these. And I also want you to notice that the width of each bar is the same and the width of each space is the same. So there's something in statistics called the area principle. So if I were making this and I made B not only as tall as it's supposed to be, but also really fat, then it would look wrong compared to the rest. It would look like there's far more than just double the amount of B's. A pie chart, again, we've talked about this and how it's nice because we're looking at the proportion or the part of a whole for each category. So again, using this grade data, we can see 20% got A's, 46% got B's, 27% got C's, 7% got D's, and then nobody got an F, which is great. So looking at that, it's very easy to just take a quick look and not have to work too hard to determine that most people in the class get a B. Next up, we're going to talk about how we can display some of this data using StatCrunch, which is provided within your textbook.